Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. The Aga Khan Award for Architecture is organized around a series of 3-year cycles, each one culminating in the recognition of our award recipients. Tonight, we celebrate the outcomes of our 14th cycle. This is an extraordinary moment for me as I think back to our decision to launch this program more than 4 decades ago. What led to that decision, you may ask, as many have asked then and since. Just why should the Ismaili Imam become so deeply involved in the world of professional architecture? The simple answer lies in my conviction that architecture, more than any other art form, has a profound impact on the quality of human life. As it has often been said, we shape our built environment, and then our buildings shape us. This close relationship of architecture to the quality of human experience has a particularly profound resonance in the developing world. I believe that we all have a responsibility to improve the quality of life whenever and wherever that opportunity arises. Our commitment to influencing the quality of architecture, intellectually and materially, grows directly out of our commitment to improving the quality of human life. As you may know, over these 4 decades, we have recognized a vast array of architectural contributions, including over 9,000 nominated projects. But the value of this program goes far beyond recognizing specific projects. The Aga Khan Architectural Award is not simply a prize, it is a process. This process involves a wide range of conversations all across the world that shape the selection process. The theme of the cycle, which culminates today, is architecture in dialogue. This theme, which emerged out of the deliberations of the steering committee and master jury, sees architecture as a robust interchange, one that can embrace a variety of diverse and even divergent perspectives. A true dialogue requires not only that we articulate one perspective, but also that we listen attentively to other perspectives. More than that, it asks us not only to listen to one another, but also to learn from one another. The rich architectural dialogue we seek to foster should include a renewed respect for the rich diversity of Islamic cultures themselves. As a way to exemplify this concern, we recently opened a new Aga Khan Centre in London, in which 7 Islamic gardens have been created, reflecting 7 different Muslim traditions. In addition, we should be working to foster a rich dialogue with non-Islamic cultures, including diverse religious traditions. Architecture can lead the way in this effort as we listen to one another and learn from one another across old divides. Pluralism means more than merely tolerating a diversity of influences and ideas. It also means welcoming the learning opportunities that diversity provides, finding ways to honor that which is unique in our individual traditions, as well as those values that connect us to all of humankind. We must think of diversity as a divine gift, a blessing, not a burden.
Ya Limadat, welcome, bienvenue. Thank you for tuning in to another Friday Night Reflections. My name is Malika Karim-Rajan, and I'm honored to welcome all of our Jamaati members, multi-faith family members, and everyone tuning in from across the globe tonight. I'm coming to you again from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and it's such a pleasure to be here hosting once again. It has been ridiculously cold here in Manitoba this week. We actually hit minus 35 with wind chill this week, so it's been pretty cold, yep, like I said. We have managed, though, however, to stay indoors and keep warm by doing some family video calls. As you can imagine, we've been trying new things to stay connected, and one new activity that we added is playing Battleship on our phones. I can sadly admit that my 3- and 6-year-old niece and nephew have legitimately beat me numerous times, as well as my niece and nephew in Toronto. And I wasn't trying to be a nice mossy with either of them to let them win. It was for real. Now, our families have been also doing some things to keep us connected, sending us pictures from their vaults, some I had never seen before, which was such a treat. And we've been celebrating birthdays over Zoom, which was so nice to be able to see so many of our family members from all across the world with technology. So we are making the most of our time here at home. I've also been seeing my friends and family members in healthcare getting their COVID-19 vaccines. That has been absolutely amazing to see. And I've also been seeing elderly members of our Jamaat getting their first and second doses. To see how excited they have been to get that protection has been amazing. And as we know, what a huge difference this will make to bringing an end to the pandemic that we're in now. I can't wait to get mine as well, like many of you guys, but I'm sure we're all going to be fine and we'll wait our turns. And now to tonight's show on the significance and role of architecture. We started off our pre-show highlighting some of the past winners of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And what a great tribute that was. Now behind me, I wanted to share with you why I decided to stand up and do it here today. This is a sketching of Notre Dame, or Notre Dame, however you'd like to say it, in Paris. It's such an iconic building which ties in the whole neighborhood around it. And because of its significance for the city and people around the world, you probably remember the outpouring of support when a structural fire broke out in 2019. Now, our episode today is going to touch on why Mawlana Hazar Imam sees architecture as so important. We have seen the importance that Mawlana Hazar Imam himself places on the built environment, having established the prestigious Aga Khan Award for Architecture in 1977. It's been 4 amazing decades thus far. Now, why is architecture so crucial? And what role does it play in our lives? Tonight, we will take a deeper dive into this fascinating topic. But first, we're going to start off our show with some words from Council for Canada's President Amirali Kassim-Laka in his 3rd installment of From the Heart, in which he speaks to the soft skills needed to succeed in today's world. Please welcome President Kassim-Laka.
My dear brothers and sisters, Yali Wadat. Tonight is the 3rd discussion in our series, From the Heart. Each week, we discuss one character trait crucial to success in today's world. We have spoken of 2 traits, agency and vision. Tonight, we will discuss the importance of humility. You may ask, why are we speaking of humility? What is its importance in today's world? Humility is one of the most powerful attributes of growth. Being humble helps build trust, which is a key aspect of leadership, and it facilitates learning. It opens our thinking to the ideas of others in a way where we can develop our own capacity faster. Humility can have a profound effect in our professional lives, in managing relationships in the workplace, working with others, and gaining respect. To understand its importance, I will explain the impact humility has on the self and on others. Humility is derived from a Latin word which means to be grounded. It entails being assured of oneself without seeking attention. To be humble is to have the perspective that it is the universal intellect which informs the human intellect and is responsible for our success. That our understanding of the world is informed by this source and not our individual doing. This mindset can become a powerful force in our interactions with others. It orients us to listen to the opinion of others, making us more empathetic. People recognize humility. They feel it in their interactions with us and respond to it in a compelling, positive way from their subconscious mind. They feel at ease with us and become more open and willing to share ideas. Our interactions become more honest rather than pretentious, and mentors naturally become more willing to coach us and guide our career trajectory when they sense our humility. In other words, people show more goodwill. A humble mindset has many other positive effects, as supported by decades of research. People with humility are able to stay stable and maintain power on the inside. They don't need to control, they don't feel a need to control others. They handle stress more effectively, and they report higher levels of physical and mental well-being. They are more aware of the situation around them, they make difficult decisions with ease, and they speak their minds. They tend to score better on tests of general knowledge. There is a link between humility and capacity to acquire knowledge. Humility also has a positive effect on judgment. It results in a more realistic estimation of oneself, others, and the circumstances. Let me spend a moment on the role that humility can play in career progression. What is the link between humility and leadership potential? Why do recruiters look for humility when assessing long-term potential? What is a connection? People with humility consult extensively. They recognize the good ideas that others have and are secure in learning from them. Effective leaders know that they cannot be subject matter experts on everything. They understand the limitations of their own knowledge and recognize the experts around them. So, they ask questions and elicit solutions from others by listening and making informed judgment calls. The best negotiators in the world ask many questions because they understand that the solution to their problem will come from listening rather than speaking. By showing humility, leaders engender support. This ability to initiate dialogue and establish consensus was one of the exemplary qualities of our beloved Holy Prophet Muhammad. He was a consultant par excellence. It is this very leadership quality which is required to move forward in today's rapidly changing world. Mawlana Hazar Imam has referred to this as adaptive leadership and has said that the key to this is intellectual humility, which keeps one's mind constantly open to a variety of viewpoints and which welcomes pluralistic exchange. I want to take a moment to address one false conception, the belief that humility is weakness, that if you're humble, you are going to be taken advantage of because you don't have self-confidence. This is untrue, and I would encourage you to separate these concepts in your mind. Humility is independent of self-esteem. The best leaders are both humble and self-confident. They recognize the need to seek help from others, but trust their own capabilities and know that they will make better decisions through consultation. My dear brothers and sisters, I will conclude by recalling the centrality of humility in our faith. At its core is the notion that our intellect is dependent on Allah. This show of humility is what impels us to seek support and turn to faith in times of need. This is a critical link between humility and the health of our minds and souls. And so, I encourage our youth to understand this concept because it is critical to leading a life of purpose, building successful relationships, career progression, and providing impactful leadership. Thank you and Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you, President Sahib, for sharing those thoughts with us. Now, tonight we are privileged to have the director of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture join us on the show, Farrokh Derakhshani. I was fortunate to speak with him earlier this week and get to pick his brain in an interview to help us all understand a little bit more about the world of architecture and the importance of it. Now, Mr. Derakhshani has been associated with the award since 1982 and has been its director for the past 15 years. His main field of specialization is the contemporary architecture of Muslim societies, and his professional work has included the design and the construction management of large-scale public works and infrastructure projects in Iran, as well as architectural design in Paris and Geneva. He also serves on boards and committees of a number of cultural institutions. Mr. Derakhshani is trained as an architect and planner at the National University of Iran and later continued his studies at the School of Architecture in Paris. But before we welcome Mr. Derakhshani, let's take a quick look at the 2019 cycle of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. Thank you so much for joining us. We have with us Mr. Farrokh Derakhshani. He's been part of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture for about 38 years, and you've been the director for 15. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'd like to start off with just talking about the concept of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. I understand that it started in 1977. A lot of people know these types of Coles Notes information, but tell us a little bit about what started it and why Hazar Imam wanted to do something like this.
His Highness, since he became the Imam, he was in charge of projects, building. There were all these schools, clinics all over the world that he had to go whenever he was traveling. Also, he had his own private programs in Italy, in Costa Smeralda. So he was dealing a lot with the architects and architecture. And he was not, in a lot of cases, he was not satisfied with what was the end products, because they did not really fit to the needs of the people. And also the other thing is that he was seeing that people are losing identity. So because the Islamic world, they had a very rich identity, especially in architecture and this heritage. But the new buildings which were built, especially after the World War II, all over the world, they were not at the same line. It was something which it did not have any specific identity and quality. It was not only about the identity, but also the quality of the buildings, the quality of spaces were not good. So he was thinking how he could have an impact on making these better, correcting in a way, the way the architecture was going. But after some consultation with a number of experts that he was always surrounded by, he came up with the idea of having an award for architecture. And that's how the Aga Khan Award for Architecture's idea was created. It was born.
Wonderful. And we know that this is not just an award. It's just not a prize pin. There's a lot of criteria that goes into picking the finalists each year. And it's not just about the building structure. So I would like to talk about in 2019, the Aga Khan Architectural Award. There was a theme that Mawlana Hazar Imam had brought up in one of his speeches there. He was talking about architecture in dialogue. So for 2019, he did point to some of the reasons that the award finalists actually became finalists and then award recipients. Could you touch on some of those points and what Mawlana Hazar Imam is looking for in his work 4 decades later still?
Well, first of all, His Highness from the very beginning was explained that he does not want the award or these activities to become a school of architecture. It means it's not going to be something that this is how things should be built. What he wanted to do is to create an atmosphere, an enabling environment that you ask questions. And by asking questions, you come up with better solutions. The main criteria that which needs the quality is excellence. Excellence in approach. That's what I would say. Excellence in approach is very important because, sometimes you've got some project because of the conditions where they are, maybe they are not built the best way, but the approach of that, how they've come up to that solution is very important. So the other thing which was very important is that in 1970s, when His Highness created the award, the world was not looking at architecture as the way it's looking today. Because His Highness brought a new idea into architecture. It is how we can improve the quality of life. Quality of life was not a part of the thinking process of the architects and the decision makers at the time. And now we can see that more and more this is becoming a kind of a routine, that the architects are becoming aware that you have to be able to create a better quality of life. And that is what we can see. Now, how can we make a better quality of life? How can we have an impact? Is to better understand the context. And that's where dialogue comes. Dialogue, it means that there is this constant talking to the other, both ways, both the architect and the client.
The open dialogue that he said between the past and the future. I feel like that's something that our Jamaati members might want to learn about. So why is that one of the criteria or pillars?
As His Highness himself had put many, many years ago, he would have liked to have an architecture which is inspired by the past and have an impact on the future. So we're not looking at nostalgia. The worst thing to think about is that if we're going to have a kind of a nostalgic way of looking, building like how our cities were, or our parents did, or our grand ancestors, or whatever. This is not the way to do it. We're not going to copy the past. We have to be inspired by the past, not to to lose the past. But at the same time, one has to look into the future. Future is very important. And it is always the role of architects and those who make buildings to think about what's going to come up. When you build a building, it's built today, but it's going to last for a long, long time, for many, many decades and even more. So it should serve people in the future as well.
Thank you. And a couple of more things that I wanted to touch on. Honoring your own culture, your Muslim culture and your identity doesn't have to mean that you're forgetting about the cultural identity of where you are currently. So talk a little bit about that for us and why that's important for Mawlana Hazar Imam.
You talk about the two aspects. The first was environment. In Islam, we're taught that we are inheriting this world, the earth, and when we leave, we have to leave it in a better condition. So this is very important, and His Highness is for him. It's very important that whatever he has been in charge as an imam, and he has been to leave a better place afterwards. So this is very important. That is today, these things are we talk a lot about environment. These environmental issues are becoming very à la mode. But in fact, it's exactly the same essence that what His Highness has been doing, and he's been following his ancestors' way of looking at the nature, because nature is the creation of God, and the human being has to make it better and not to make it worse. The second thing which His Highness was talking about was dialogue between cultures. I've been talking about this a lot, that we human beings are made of layers. And it is very important to understand this, that we have got layers and layers of identity and experience. In France today, over almost 10% of the population, 8%, whatever, are people who are coming from the Muslim people from North Africa. But they're not, you can't call them Maghrebins. No, they are French because they've been there for 2 generations. They're no different. However, they are different. It means they've got different layers, and these different layers should be seen as complementary.
Okay, wonderful. I'd like for a moment potentially to maybe look at some of the award recipients from 2019 to kind of highlight those aspects that you were just talking about. If we could talk about the winner from Bangladesh, I want you to explain. I thought that this was really interesting for me. The architect devised the solution of an amphibious structure that could sit on the ground or float on the water depending on seasonal conditions. I thought that was fascinating. So if you could please explain as to what that design was. I'm sure we'll have some pictures to go alongside here, and talk about that to the Jamaat, maybe those that don't know about it.
And that's one of the projects which has got a fantastic story. It's very interesting, the story from the beginning of it. The creation, it was created by a Bangladeshi teacher in UK that she taught there for many years. She took all her pension to go and build a school in Bangladesh. So the story itself is fantastic. Those people who know the Bangladesh, they know that with the floods, it's an area which floods every year. So the land, all these rivers, all these streams, they just change path. So sometimes you've got a piece of land, it's yours. 5 years later, it is under the water. Again, 20 years later, it comes back. So it is something because the water moves. So with such a condition, they had to come with a solution. This is very important when you look at this project, as you can see in the images that now you're seeing on the screen. This is made of bamboo, and it's a very kind of a low technology. However, the person who's done that, he's someone who knows all the different technologies. He's as I said, he's been building buildings in urban areas, high rises, etc. But he knew he had to come up with a solution for that specific context. That is what we're talking about, dialogue. It means that he understood well what the context is. To build a school which, when it comes a few months a year, it can float and then it goes back. And not into that, then he had to do a lot of innovations. For example, how you can have toilets which are floating. And these are very important, very simple solutions, but very effective and very high tech in a way, but using simple materials. So this is a project which is is in the service of the people, at the same time using the material correctly, coming up with new ways of doing things which we didn't know before. So it's got a lot of innovations. It is not just repeating what our ancestors have done, and that is very important.
All right, now I want to talk to you a little bit about your experience over the last 35 plus years of working alongside Mawlana Hazar Imam, and also working alongside and with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your experience has been and what you've learned over your time with the Aga Khan Trust for Culture?
Well, the first thing I was very impressed is that how much His Highness is involved and how much he knows. It's not a matter of he knows, it's like an encyclopedic way of knowing everything. No, he has got a way to see things and ask the right questions. And sometimes in meetings, he comes to the architects and he says, I'm not an architect, but then when he starts asking the questions, he asks the questions from the architects that it's very difficult for them to answer because he's coming right to the point. What I understood from working all these years for His Highness was his vision, because he's not looking at today and the immediate things which are happening. His vision is long term, and that I think has been the most inspiring for me, that you're working for the good and you're not looking for an immediate reward of things. That's something which we're trying to do and explain it to the people. The second thing is the learning. We have to learn from others, learn from our own experiences, and learn from our mistakes. So this is very important, and we should not be shy of learning. So this is why we've also created His Highness has donated 5 chairs at Harvard and MIT. And within the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, we've got a continuous program for education. It's very important to share what we have learned with the others.
Wonderful. Kind of goes into our next segment when we're talking about city parks and city dwellings. What do you think about how the climate crisis will affect how we design spaces, especially in the developing world now? Going into that and looking at, is that something that is being looked at for the future of architecture as well? I'm going to explain a small thing about the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. One of the things with the Aga Khan Award for Architecture is that no project which has been initiated by His Highness or there's any involvement of the AKDN can be nominated. So His Highness was trying, by creating the award, to show what good other people are doing good that we have to learn from. So it was kind of an exchange. But he understood that sometimes he has to create some examples, good examples. And that's how the park in Cairo, the Al-Azhar Park in Cairo, was created. Actually, it was during one of the award seminars in 1984 in Cairo that the idea of a gift to the city of Cairo as a park became, which His Highness continued it, and he put a lot of effort in it. And finally, after a number of years, it was inaugurated. And as you all know, it's one of the most successful urban projects ever. Now, he understood, by starting that project, we have seen that many other parks has been created, parks and gardens. Parks and gardens are very important because they've got 2 functions. One is environmental, and second is social. Especially in urban places, parks are where where it becomes a social cohesion becomes possible, because you go there and you see other people.
That what we were talking about, interculture activities, that's where it happens. It is in the public spaces, public areas. In 2016, the previous cycle, there was an award given to a public space in Copenhagen. You think about why Copenhagen, Denmark, that's not an Islamic country, but it was in a neighborhood with some 60 different nationalities were living. And the architects and the landscape designers and the people who made the concept of the project, artists, they created an urban space with all these different 60 nationalities can get together, can be know each other. And it should be spaces that it belongs to them. So their symbols of their cities, their countries, their cultures are there, and they can just be together. So this is one of the important things about gardens. Second thing is that it creates, because it's very important, the green spaces in cities. And in a lot of cities, unfortunately, because the way it was developed so fast, there were no planning, not much space was left for parks. Everywhere is not Manhattan with a central park. So in the city of Cairo, even if you go to the Google map, you look at the city and then you can spot Al-Azhar because it's the only big green space there. And that shows how we can have an impact on the quality of life of people by creating these public spaces and parks in certain places, because it helps a lot with the environment.
Okay, I think you went right into our next question here, but I wanted to ask you architectural projects that have personally inspired you, and perhaps ones that His Highness has commissioned that you see as quite significant. So we're talking about the Al-Azhar Park, we're talking about sustainability, bringing that in. I believe that it was on a landfill. Is that correct from my knowledge from my high school Beit al-Ilm days? So just talking about that revitalization of that city, but also what are some of the other projects that you have felt potentially personally inspired by Mawlana Hazar Imam?
For the Al-Azhar Park, I should explain that what was important is the gradual way that the project develops. And His Highness is someone who has been able to enable this to work. What I mean is that the project at the beginning was only the park, but little by little, the whole area of Dalbar Ahmar, which was the connection with it, was included in the project. So the project became an urban project, and it's not only a park, it is the whole neighborhood. Because for His Highness, it was very important that how can you do development in one area and just leave the next door people in whatever they were. So this is very important that we have got projects which are multidisciplinary. It is different approaches. Within the same neighborhood, education program works. The Aga Khan Foundation is active in health facilities, etc. It was the same in the Bagh Babur in Kabul. So it was working that how we can make around not only the park, but around it much better. So these are very inspiring for me. Another project for me, which I think among His Highness's projects is really one of the most, I would say is a legacy, is the Aga Khan Hospital in Karachi. The Aga Khan University Hospital in Karachi is one of the best examples of medical facilities ever. Although it was built some 40, 50 years ago, some of it now has changed, a lot of additions, etc. But it has been an architecture earmark. It's very important. Well, you've got other interesting projects as well, because His Highness was keen to bring good architects to work for me. Back in 1986, Fumihiko Maki was a member of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture's master jury. And that's how he became familiar with the Aga Khan network. And then he has been the architect of three important buildings within the AKDN, and the delegation in Ottawa, the Aga Khan Museum, and also the Aga Khan Centre in London. Charles Correa is one of the people who His Highness called upon him for the creation of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And he later was the architect of the Ismaili Centre in Toronto. And it goes on and on and on this way. So there's this kind of involvement of the award and His Highness's architectural projects.
So how can the Jamaat play a role, Jamaati members play a role to help advance Mawlana Hazar Imam's vision for the award for architecture and architecture in general?
Well, the first thing which is important is for the Jamaat to understand the importance of the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, Aga Khan Trust for Cultures, different activities, because we've also got the Aga Khan Music Award, Music Initiative, the Historic Cities Program, and the Aga Khan Museum. So all of these are a series of activities which are talking about dealing with culture. So understanding the importance of the culture within His Highness's messages is very important. Secondly, is that once we're talking about historic cities projects like the Al Hazar Park, like the park in Edmonton, like the many other projects, we are talking about our own projects. So yes, when you go to your friends, your neighbors, to your colleagues, and you want to explain all the activities of the Jamaat, it is important to explain these projects and how wonderful they are. And the best way is to sometimes to read some of the books and go a little bit deeper into not only the images, but what is the message of each of these projects.
Wow, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with Jamaati members about the award for architecture, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture, or even, the understanding as to why this is so important for Mawlana Hazar Imam to continue?
I've been explaining this in different occasions while I was giving talks in the Jamaat Khanas or for ITREP or different people, is the importance of the culture, the Aga Khan Award for Architecture and Culture in His Highness's endeavors. First of all, what I want to just keep explaining that again, His Highness, the Hazar Imam, is not only the Imam of the Ismailis. He, as an Imam, has got a much more important duty to the Ummah at all. So that is very important. So he cannot do that without it's not only paying attention to education of people in rural areas. It's not only having hospitals or health facilities. These are very important, but you have to have also look at yourself, the way the mind goes, and cultural activities are one of the most important things. Culture is a basic need. It is an important part of development, and it is something which goes not only in these culture. It's very difficult to use the word culture development. We can use economic development, we can use social development, but we cannot. It's difficult to say culture development, but it is important, and it has got the same impact in Canada as it has in northern Pakistan or Gujarat or anywhere else. So because people have to become aware of who they are, what they are, and what are their aspirations and what they get inspired from. And that is what His Highness is trying to give the people to explain to them, that we have to be proud of what we have, our culture, and we have to be able to tell the others how what we have is as good as what they have.
Thank you so much, Mr. Derakhshani, for joining us today and really helping us understand a little bit more about the need for architecture and potentially that there is more to it, right? That it's not just a building, like you just said. There's so many different aspects tied to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you again for joining us, Mr. Derakhshani, and for sharing with us the inspiring work of the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. And now a special treat. My family and I have visited several of the Ismaili centers around the world, but have not yet managed to travel to Tajikistan. Inshallah, one day. Many of you know that the architect of the Ismaili Centre Dushanbe is from Canada, Farouk Noormohamed. We are very, very happy that Mr. Noormohamed will be joining us here shortly for a virtual tour of the Ismaili Centre in Dushanbe to get an insider's look in anticipation of a real tour down the road one day. Enjoy.
My name is Farouk Noormohamed. I'm the architect of the Ismaili Centre Dushanbe. The Ismaili Centre in Dushanbe was commissioned as a competition by Mawlana Hazar Imam, where architects from around the world were invited, and we had a winning submission for the design of the center based on the design parameter that had been established for the project by Mawlana Hazar Imam. This was based on the mandate given by Hazar Imam for the design of the center, which was to reflect the Ismaili, Tajik, Muslim heritage of the Ismailis of the region. As you know, Ismaili centers are centers of excellence that are there to celebrate permanence of Ismaili settlement in any given region. And this is in what is traditionally called Pamiri houses. And these houses have 5 columns. And these 5 columns were a reminder of the Panchtan. And when the Soviets came in, they were not allowed to practice their faith. And these 5 columns reminded them of the Panchtan. This was a private expression which was within the family and only known to the family as a secret that was not to be shared outside. But as we were now building an Ismaili center, and the presence of Ismailis was to be celebrated as a permanent statement, these 5 columns could now no longer be a secret within the buildings, and we decided to create these 5 columns that would protrude through the building and symbolically hold up the sky. The design as it developed was intimately looked at by Hazar Imam in every detail, and we had a number of work sessions with Hazar Imam. And in these work sessions, Hazar Imam would always be looking not only at the design, but a broader aspect of how these projects would benefit the Jamaat, and what are the things that we could do to make sure that the Jamaat has the maximum benefit out of a building like this. And one such meeting was in Dushanbe, where we had a work session with Hazar Imam, and I had a small model, and very quickly Hazar Imam picked it up from my hand, went to the outside and started looking at it, and he saw the light streaming through this little model that I had made up. And it became something that one could never forget, because the level of detail and involvement Hazar Imam has on our projects, particularly the Ismaili centers and those centers where they are designed for a greater consumption, particularly to the outside world. Hazar Imam takes very, very detailed look at everything that we do, and he is very well aware of every aspect of the project. Let us take a walk through the building. As we go up the courtyard, there is a cascading water, and water is a reminder of the sustenance of life, and the sound of moving water creates a sense of tranquility. And with the facade of the building creates a sense of balance and geometry. The central portal is a reminder of Muhammad as the city of knowledge and Ali as its gate. Once through the gate, you are now in search of He who is above all else, and you come in and you see this grand walkway which has got a series of lattice panels in the ceiling which create a shadow on the side walls, which are made of brick from Uzbekistan's Samarkand area. The light and shadow play is a reminder that our life must always be in balance, a balance between the Zahir and the Batin. In this concourse, the spaces that open up are administrative spaces for the council and the institutions on one side, and on the other side, the council chamber, which is also used by other institutions, and a private office for Hazar Imam that Hazar Imam uses when he visits Tajikistan. Going beyond that is a view of the main courtyard, which we have referred to as the Great Court. The Great Court is designed stylistically as a 4-Iwan courtyard, 4-portal courtyard around a central fountain area, and traditionally a charbagh courtyard with 4 quadrants. Each one of the areas are part of the functional representations of the building. The 4 portals lead into 4 functional areas: administration, social, education, and prayer. So as one walks through this glazed walkway, as one goes left and then towards the prayer hall, you see the concourse leading into an open area, which is a pre-function area, which opens up into an outside courtyard. And we enter the social hall, which is traditional Tajik motif patterns on the floor. And the walls are embellished with carved plaster, which is a very traditional Tajik technique. And our recent Ismaili Centre in Toronto also has this carved plaster. And in fact, the same carvers that actually did the carved plaster at the Ismaili Centre in Dushanbe are the very same ones that actually did the carved plaster in Toronto. The courtyard is adjacent to the social hall, so from the social hall you can also enter the Great Court. Going beyond that, across the courtyard, you can see the charbagh courtyard with a central fountain, and leads to the other portal, or exactly opposite this, which takes you to the educational center. This educational center is around a smaller courtyard scale and size, which is appropriate to children using it. And it is set up in such a way that it opens up into an amphitheater on the outside and to the library. And eventually, as one comes off that area, there's opportunity for you to go to the multipurpose hall, which is part of the educational component of the facility. And then it finally leads to the prayer hall, which is a culmination of all the experiences. So the first element that you see is an entry area where the space actually takes a change in direction as the prayer hall faces Mecca, but it's also one where there is a change in the floor material and a place where you take your shoes off. The design of the center is such that since it's so large and there's so much of concourse area, the coats are removed as you enter into the center, and one removes their shoes just as you enter the prayer hall, which allows you to use the whole facility without having to remove shoes except when you go into the prayer hall. The prayer hall, once you enter, there is an anteroom, and then there is a strong rhythm of the brickwork that is visible. The ceiling has the Tajik ceiling of the Pamiri house, which has got rotated squares with calligraphy around it. The whole space has got brick detailed in such a way that it represents the tradition of the region, but it is very, very Ismaili because the front wall, the Qibla wall of the prayer hall, actually has the calligraphy which says the names of Muhammad, Ali, Hassan, Hussein, and Zara, which is Fatima to Zahra. And this is done in glazed brick, and it soars up in the central tower, and the two flanking walls are almost a reminder of a person in prayer, and the light, Nur of Allah, basically coming in through three penetrations that are above in the tower, where light streams into the space, and a reminder of the spiritual journey of the human being. The side walls have got niches and perforations in the wall, which are a reminder of the Zahir and the Batin, and there are 49 perforations on each side, reminding one of the 49th Imam, being the Imam that actually built this center. And the ceiling is made of wood that is celebrating nature, and the 5 steps lead to the center. The 5 steps are a reminder of understanding of our faith, where the ultimate goal of one's journey is to be one with He who is above all else. The Ismaili Centre is remote for most of us that can't travel all around the world, but I hope that you enjoyed this little tour that I've given you, and you will make it a point to get out there once it is open and safe to travel, but do travel to Uzbekistan first to understand the architectural heritage of the region, and then visit the Ismaili Centre, and of course go on to Korog, where the Korog Jamaat Khana is totally different and set up and based on the Badakhshani architecture, which is very local and vernacular. Thank you, and Yali Madad.
Wow, such beautiful work. Thank you so much, Farouk Noormohamed, for taking us on that tour. And now to our next segment, where we had the chance to ask some of our Ismaili architects to reflect on their work as well and the impact that architecture has in our lives. We hope you enjoy it.
What inspired me to pursue architecture as a career was honestly looking through Mimar magazines in Jamaat Khana when I was a kid. When I was 9 or 10, I used to hole up in the library and peruse that until my mom and dad were ready to go home.
I began kind of my creative journey through visual arts, painting in the public space, on walls, murals, very influenced by graffiti. It was really an understanding as I started delving deeper into the Islamic arts. That architecture seemed to be kind of the completion of all the other forms.
I was very fond of mechanical engineering, anything to do with engines and moving parts, and I wasn't too sure if I would like the immobile status of the built environment. My father mentioned quotes from Hazar Imam. He said that architecture matters so much to the Imam, and the Imam is so heavily involved in the built environment. So that was a turning point for me.
I have always been drawn to architecture because I see it as an intersection between science and art. I was working on a project where we were focused on delivering sanitation facilities and infrastructure to rural housing communities in the province of Sindh in Pakistan. The community felt restricted with the limited infrastructure that they had, that the poor design of their homes and the spaces between their homes and outside their homes was impacting their lives and their lifestyles.
The dome of Medina Masjid, the contractor found me and kind of challenged me to paint this dome, which was 40 feet above the prayer hall. So I took on that dome, and I couldn't really find too much guidance on how to actually apply the geometry spherically to achieve this. It was a 16-pointed star and a radius of about 16 feet, 12 windows. So that project really pushed me to engage skills in terms of modeling and projection of geometry from architecture, with my skills as a muralist in painting it. It took me about 1,000 hours, and so that really opened up a new dimension of my practice, infusing art and architecture together.
My thesis project was focused on flooding in rural Sindh. Livestock for a rural family is the source of food, income, and above all, it is actually an investment for them. When there are instances of flooding, the human members of rural communities are evacuated, but the livestock are left behind. In order to mitigate this loss of resource and life, my project, Social Infrastructures, focuses on redesigning and reimagining simple infrastructures such as bridges, embankments, and bus stops.
A number of TKN assignments for designing Jamaat Khanas in Badakhshan, Afghanistan. I love the way we've been able to work with different stakeholders and create this design that would be functional, that would be cost effective, and they have their own aesthetics, and they also have something to do with the culture.
The aspects of Islam that's inspired my work really revolve around balance. Having worked in sustainable design, we try to find balance in how we deal with energy and resources and how we integrate the environment in our work. Everything from living walls to solar energy and renewables to ensure we create healthy environments for people.
Islam is kind of very entrenched in my work, so when I was young, I decided that I'm going to actually study Arabic and learn classical Arabic, learn to read and write, so I could understand how kind of calligraphy evolved into graffiti. I'm not necessarily going out and reusing Islamic motifs. I'm more looking at the principles of geometry that are aligned with other traditions.
The ideal project I would like to work on in my hometown would be schools and places of education.
It would have to be to add to the existing open spaces in Karachi. Currently, the open spaces in Karachi lack ease and access for all, and they often take the form of secluded parks. But I believe that Karachi, with its warm months and the lovely sea breeze, can definitely be home to a diverse range of spaces that can contribute positively to the social and the ecological health of the city.
For Calgary in Canada, I've designed this Persian pavilion. The whole structure is made of 10 letters, Persian calligraphy of poetry, verses in praise of acquisition of knowledge.
Well, I have actually been pursuing my ideal project. It's known as X-Site. I designed this project where one container kind of rotates above another container and it follows planetary movement. The idea is that when the container is viewing a planet, it projects geometry, light and sound associated with that planet.
The projects that have been commissioned by Mawlana Hazar Imam that have been the most meaningful, inspiring to me have been Aga Khan schools. I've had the pleasure and benefit of working in Gilgit, Pakistan, where I got to see some of the schools that were made with very basic materials like stone and wood that really, for kids who have very little, were a very important place to learn and to play and to feel safe, and also to have teachers who brought that inspiration. I think that also extends probably to how my mom taught at an Aga Khan's primary school, and how important education is to the Jamaat and the future.
To me, the Aga Khan Museum resembles a crown. It stands for the secular, the dunya, the worldly, and the Ismaili Centre resembles that of a hat. So that represents the spiritual. And then the reflecting pool, as the Imam said, is that moment of reflection, the interconnectedness, the relation between the deen and dunya.
The Dubai Center actually really struck me as a surprise because I think it was the most traditional of the Ismaili centers around the world. It kind of had these two worlds colliding. The way that the domes were executed were in a style of masonry that is like seldom seen, and it's really immaculate brickwork that's actually kind of representative of very high-end contemporary architecture that involves masonry. It kind of had this strong contemporary voice in a very traditional kind of form, the volumes and the domes and the kind of axis of entryway and how you move through the building was very traditional courtyard. So that project really stands out for me as one of my favorites.
To me, not only is the design of that individual building interesting, but also the relationships that it maintains with the context, the infrastructure systems that need to go in place, and the overall coordination between all the buildings on a site. Because all of those are important in creating a truly great piece of architecture.
Thank you all. I know we have many more other architects and aspiring architects in our Jamaat, and thank you for the contribution that you make every day with your special talents and hard work. Now we end our show tonight, as always, with our much-loved segment of musical expressions. I don't have any good snacks with me left here in Winnipeg to share with you guys, so Masies, moms, any other aunts out there that want to help fill our supply, and uncles too, I'm not discriminating, please, we're ready for our next care package whenever you're able to send it. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I really had a wonderful time hosting, and I wish you all a great weekend. Yali Madat.
रसूल अल्लाह की नबूवत है रसूल अल्लाह की हाथों में तेरे है इमामत अल्लाहुम्मा मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा दिशा में है तू ही दिखे किस्सा अकीदत का कैसे लिखे दीदार से तेरे मिलता सुकून आनंद ही आनंद है क्या मैं कहूँ नूर का साया रखना सदायों नूर का साया रखना सदायों होगी हम पर तेरी इनायत अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मदिन वाले मुहम्मद Listen to the angels calling your name wanting for the mercy of your flame this light you've bestowed upon us today all of the darkness is now gone away you are the Noor son of Ali you are the Noor son of Ali you are the progeny of Muhammad Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wale Muhammad पीछे